Whatever rocks your socks, whatever spins your top, whatever winds your watch, whatever flips your flop, whatever turns you on, whatever flies your flag, whatever bangs your gong, or whatever swings your bag. Do it often, but do it well, 'cause nobody knows and there's no way to tell. When the ride ends,
good morning and Merry Christmas from Turtle Beach. This is a special edition of Postcards from Turtle Beach because it's Christmas Day. It's hard to think of what to get for Christmas for 5,000 nearly perfect strangers. So I decided what I'd do, since I don't know what size you wear or what is your favorite color, or do you like Tickle Me Elmo? I've decided to read you a Christmas story that I wrote in, I think, 1993. It's been published in a variety of publications over the years, and it is a redemption story, which is my favorite kind of story, and I think the best kind of story for Christmas. So I think it will take about 20 minutes to read this. I encourage you to think of it like a podcast. Don't sit and stare at my face for 20 minutes. Find something constructive to do with your hands, and keep this on in the background. Maybe you're baking a pie for Christmas. Maybe you're decorating your tree. Maybe you're just sitting in your favorite chair with a hot beverage and you're knitting. Whatever you're doing, settle in. I'm going to clear my throat. Excuse me for a second. In our circles, red leather, yellow leather, right? An actor prepares. Thank you, Mr. Stanislavski. All right, let's get into this. I am not going to wear my computer glasses to read this. I'm just going to take off my glasses, and I think I'm going to take off this hat too. It has served its purpose. All right, here we go. The name of this story is A Clit-mat Carol. Abe Schrute grabbed the waiter by the elbow and pulled him back to the table. "Where the hell's my green onion?" he growled at the teenager. "The fried rice comes with green onion. Where's the green onion?" The waiter stared back and tried to smile, but it was only half-hearted. He couldn't understand a word that Abe was saying, but it appeared that the old Farang had counted the grains of rice on his plate and found them lacking. The waiter didn't know much English, but he knew that a Farang who had the money to come visit Phuket should be able to afford something other than a plate of fried rice and a bottle of water, especially on the night they called Clit-mat Ip. Abe tired of waiting for a response. "Balls! Horseshit! If you're gonna work in a restaurant, you gotta learn English." The boy twisted his arm away and scampered off in fright. "Damn kids! Pay 80 baht for a plate of fried rice and no damn onion. Onion's the best part. Every time you turn around in this country, somebody's picking your pocket." He ladled generous amounts of the chilies and the fish sauce, provided free in little caddies in the center of the table, onto his rice and began to eat. Abe hunched over the table, his skinny left arm wrapped around his plate as if he was afraid someone would try to steal his food. He shoveled the rice into his mouth and washed it down with gulps of water. When he was finished, he picked his teeth with his fork and washed his fingers in his drinking glass. Then he counted 100 baht in coins out of a plastic bottle he wore on a string around his neck, and he left them on the table for the waiter. The young waiter was seated by the door watching the TV that was hung over the cashier station. As Abe approached him, the young man stood up and delivered a little bow and his best "Merry Clit-mat." But as Abe passed, a few grains of rice sticking to the gray stubble on his chin, he shouted at the boy, "Balls! Horseshit!" Abe stopped just outside the door, and he looked suspiciously up and down the street. The sidewalk was crowded with tourists, stumbling from bar to bar, haggling with t-shirt vendors, waving down tuk-tuks. Abe plotted a path down the block toward the beach road, a path that would expose him to the least risk of contact with other people. He began to weave his way toward the beach, just as wary of the passing knots of laughing tourists as he was of the buckled pavement. He'd gone no more than 10 paces when he noticed a European couple handing out money to a gaggle of excited children selling flower garlands. The tourists were both fat and sunburned, and only an enormous purse distinguished the female from the male. The children were gathering and chattering and giggling and hanging garland after garland around the necks of the foreigners, who appeared to be just as giddy as the kids. As Abe passed, he pulled the sleeve of the spherical male half of the pair, and he said, "You know, these kids are all controlled by gangsters. That money's just going to go buy dope for some speed freak." The man looked at Abe with shock. "What does it matter?" he said. "Look at these kids. Look how happy they are. I buy all their garlands, and they get to go home early, maybe get some sleep tonight. It's Christmas. What's wrong with you?" Abe spat "Balls, horseshit" at the tourist and stalked off down the street. He turned left on the beach road and started south down the dark promenade. Most of the tuk-tuks that passed didn't bother to offer him a ride. The local drivers all recognized him by his hunched shoulders and his knobby knees. They knew he would rather walk than pay for a lift. A new driver slowed down and offered a shy, you, where you go?" But Eb shouted, "Balls, horseshit." The shocked driver sped off, and Abe flipped his middle finger at the back of the receding tuk-tuk. "Damn people think just because you're white, they can be rude. You. What? It's too hard to say excuse me? Screw 'em all. Balls, horseshit." When he came up the driveway to the Chai-dee bungalows, Abe stood for a moment to catch his breath in the shadows outside the open-air, cement floor space that the management liked to flatter with the name Sala Lan Chai Seafood Restaurant. The Sala was only a tin roof on some concrete pillars. It had been built originally as a carport. It was halfway up a good-sized hill across the road and at least 50 meters from the sea. On this night, the place was made festive, with strands of electric fairy lights strung between the joists of the roof, cardboard angels taped to the concrete pillars, and crowds of young budget travelers noisily enjoying themselves. Amid the rented motorcycles scattered across the gravel parking lot, the last dying embers of a charcoal fire glowed in a huge brazier. Abe could smell the grease that had burned onto the coals. "Balls," grumbled Abe from his vantage point out on the driveway. He ran a critical eye along the buffet. "Idiots, paying 800 baht for barbecued chicken and cranberry sauce." He shouted, "Cranberry sauce is for Thanksgiving, you idiots!" But he was certain nobody heard him. He skirted the Sala Lan Chai Seafood Restaurant and made his way to his bungalow, which stood pretty far up the hill, at the end of a brick path from which most of the bricks had sunk out of sight into the mud. His was the bungalow farthest from the restaurant and the road and the sea, and thus the cheapest room in the place. Abe's bungalow was so far removed from the others that it had the appearance of a wounded animal on the edge of the herd, waiting for a lion to leap out of the jungle and end its suffering. It was a slow, painful walk up the hill for Abe, whose knees popped with every step. Even with the exertion of the walk, he didn't break a sweat. Abe's blood was so thin that he never felt the heat. He let himself into his room, turned on the light, and immediately looked around to make sure that nothing was missing. While Abe had a small fortune in a Cayman Islands bank, what few material possessions he owned were present in the bungalow. His travel clock on the bedside table, his carry-on bag in a corner, his toiletries kit next to the sink. One of his t-shirts was hanging in the closet, one hung on the drying rack in the bathroom, and one was on his back. As he checked his wallet and his passport, which were hidden under a corner of the carpet beneath the bed, Abe noticed an envelope on the floor, which had evidently been pushed under the door while he was away at dinner. Excuse me. It was an airmail envelope from home, and the postmark showed that it had followed Abe from Bangkok to Chiang Mai to Koh Samui and on to Krabi before finally finding him on Phuket. The return address on the envelope was that of a law firm in Des Moines, Iowa. When he saw that, Abe laughed out loud. "You guys never give up, do you?" he said to the envelope, and throwing himself onto his bed, he ran a bony finger under the envelope's flap. This letter was almost identical to the previous dozen or so that Abe had received in the 2 years since he'd left the United States. The firm of Kaplan, Seidman, and Pigeon were informing Mr. Schrute that in his absence, the court had found in favor of Mrs. Belle Jacob and awarded her one half of the proceeds of the sale of the Happy Bones Dog Toy Company, once owned in partnership by Mr. Schrute and the late Mr. Jacob. Mr. Schrute was ordered hereby and forthwith to return said monies to Mrs. Jacob, along with interest and penalties, or be in contempt of court and liable to a jail term of not less than 3 years, etc., etc., etc. Balls! Abe wadded up the letter and threw it across the room, missing the wastebasket by more than 3 feet. He was about to treat the envelope the same way when he noticed that there was another piece of paper inside. He drew it out cautiously and between 2 fingers, as if it might bite him. The paper was small, a pale pink in color, torn from a notepad of a style that a certain kind of Midwestern woman keeps next to the phone in her kitchen. In the upper left corner of the page was a cartoon of a cat watching butterflies through a window. The handwriting was in velvet ink. He read the note with a scowl. "Abe," this missive said, "if you are doing this because you're still angry with me for choosing Marty Jacob over you all those years ago, please stop it. You know that my marriage was unhappy, and Marty paid me back 100 times for any pain I might have caused you. I'm not asking for the money for myself. I'm doing all right with the dog grooming salon. But Tim wants to go to medical school, and he'll never be able to afford it without the money from Marty's company. And it was Marty's company too, as much as yours. Say what you will about Marty Jacob. He was always a good man of business. I'm only asking you to do the right thing, Abe. Love, Belle." Abe smashed the pink paper into his fist and tossed it across the room. This time he missed the wastebasket by 5 feet. "Horseshit," he said to the walls. "Breaks my heart 40 years ago. Now she wants me to pay for little Timmy to go to school. Marty was never a good man of business. He was up to his neck in debt when he died. Carrying that debt around is what killed him. She knows that. She had to sell their damn house to pay his bills. Screw her. He paced around the room for a minute. He picked up the letter and reread it, then tore it into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. A few pieces of pink paper remained in the bowl. Abe flushed them again. I gotta have a drink, he said to his empty room. Reaching under the bed, he lifted a corner of the moldy carpet and pulled out his wallet. He carefully selected 2 red notes from the wallet and just as carefully replaced the wallet under the bed. Then he went down to the restaurant. In the Sala Lancai, the noise of Slavic Christmas carols was blaring out of cracked speakers. Gangs of grubby European 20-somethings in carefully groomed dreadlocks milled around the tables, drinking Mekong soda and tripping over chairs. A dog was under a table, chewing on an expensive running shoe he'd found outside the front door of somebody's bungalow. Abe crept around the edge of the crowd until he came to the cashier. Give me a bottle of Sang Tip, a bag of ice, and a bottle of Sprite. The girl was wrapping the bottle of whiskey in newspaper, and Abe was holding out his money to her, but the bills were immediately swept aside by a fat brown hand, dimpled at the knuckles. "Don't you worry, Mr. Abe," said a voice at Abe's elbow. Abe looked down into the doll-like face of Papa Boone, the proprietor of Chaidi Bungalows, who on this night was dressed in a red felt jacket trimmed in white cotton wool, which was too small across the shoulders and left his chest exposed. On his head was a red felt hat that stood straight up like a traffic cone. Abe found his eyes drawn to the blue two-tailed lizard tattoo that sprawled across Papa Boone's chest and peeked out between the splayed collars of the threadbare red coat. "You very good customer. You VIP. Papa give you from Clit-mat." The jolly old man reached over the counter and pulled a Snickers bar out of the candy display and dropped it into the bag with the whiskey, ice, and soda pop. "Merry Clit-mat, Mr. Abe," he said. Abe tried to protest, saying that he wanted no favors, but Papa Boone was abruptly dragged away by a gang of happy Swedes for drinks at their table. Abe stood at the cashier's counter for a moment, looking somewhat wistfully at the party, and then he took his bag up to his room. As he trudged up the hill, he noticed that there were no lights on in any of the other bungalows. Around his lighted window, there was nothing but dark jungle all the way to the top of the hill, where a pale full moon was made hazy by the humidity. He was the only person at the Chaidi Bungalows who was not at the party. As he set out a glass and put the ice into a bowl, Abe listened to the sounds coming up from the restaurant. Somebody was singing "O Holy Night" in French. He put the candy bar beside the glass and pulled out the Sprite and the whiskey. The cashier had wrapped the bottles in pages from the previous week's Phuket Gazette, and as Abe slowly unwound the stiff paper, his mind still on the music floating up from the restaurant, a photograph caught his eye. It was the photo of a Falang, a man of advanced years and nondescript features. For some reason, the face looked familiar to Abe, so he read the caption to see if it was someone he might have met on the island. The caption said, "Mr. Cecil Fowler, age 64, was found dead in his condominium at the Phang Sop Villa on 10 December. The medical examiner at Wat Chira Hospital determined the cause of death to be an overdose of pain medication and listed the death as a suicide. Because Mr. Fowler left no will, and because of the advanced state of decomposition of the body, the Australian Embassy has ordered that the remains be cremated. There will be no memorial service. Abe had never met Mr. Fowler, but as he looked again, it was at what was obviously a reproduction of Mr. Fowler's passport photo. He knew why the face was so familiar. Mr. Fowler had looked a lot like Abe. Abe's legs suddenly felt weak, and he sat down heavily. He made himself a stiff drink, and he tore the wrapper off the Snickers bar. Its chocolate was coated with a gray crust of decomposition. Abe put it down without taking a bite. From his seat at the desk under the window, Abe could see down the hill to the restaurant and past it to the empty beach road, and beyond that to the sea. Moonlight was reflected in the perfectly flat water, stretching all the way out to the horizon. The Milky Way climbed up from the horizon and arched over the Chai-Dee bungalows. A single yacht rode at anchor in the bay. Twinkling lights were strung in a dotted chevron from the stern up to the tip of the mast and then back down to the prow. These lights were reflected in the water under the boat in a shimmering V. The lights looked to Ebb like a pair of blinking arrows, one pointing up, one pointing down. The Sala Lan Chai was an oasis of light and sound in a dark, silent landscape. Under its corrugated metal roof, the crowd of tourists was a jumble of color and movement in the dim glow of the fairy lights. No single individual was distinguishable. Abe thought about Mr. Fowler, rotting in the tropical heat on the floor of his condo. His absence from his usual haunts must have gone unnoticed by his neighbors. The body probably wasn't found until the rent was overdue. Abe wondered what could have happened to the man that made him take his own life. As Abe finished his drink, Bob Marley's Santa Claus is Coming to Town floated up the hill. He took the pages of the Gazette off the desk, folded them, then folded them again and again. When he had a stiff lump of paper, he twisted in his chair and threw it backhanded at the trash basket. It dropped right into the basket without touching the rim. Abe mixed his second drink. He was suddenly hungry again. He hadn't had cranberry sauce since he was a boy. "What if that was turkey?" he said aloud. "A great big turkey with crispy skin and not chicken after all." He thought he would definitely go down and join the party. He didn't think about the price at all. But first he thought he'd write a letter. He pulled some paper and a pen out of the desk drawer. The paper had Chai-Dee Bungalows, Phuket, Thailand printed on it, and it had been in the drawer so long its corners were yellowed and curled. He looked out the window, down the hill, and as his little clock on the bedside table beeped 12 times to greet Christmas Day, Abe wrote, "Dear Belle, sorry it's taken me so long to get back to you, but I've been traveling around Thailand, and well, the mail's not so good here." The end. I just adore a redemption story. All right, that's it. That's my redemption story for Christmas. I hope, however you celebrate, if you do, I hope you have a great day today. I hope the year to come is better than the last one, and they just get better for all of us every single year. I want to say thank you very much for joining me every week on this channel, and I hope I can keep you entertained. Thanks again, and Merry Christmas.
Whatever shaves your sheep, whatever bakes your lamb, whatever digs your peak, whatever smokes your ham, whatever blows your nose, whatever chews your bone, whatever squirts your hose, whatever sings your song. Do it often, but do it well. Nobody knows and there's no way to tell. When you're riding, shoot down to that